There comes a moment in every life when the room gets quiet and you hear the truth you've been avoiding. Not the loud opinions of others, not the judgments, the whispers, the side eyes, but the still, honest voice inside you asking, how am I treating myself? Because here's the hard, holy truth. People don't respect you when you don't first respect yourself. I know what it feels like to shrink so others can feel comfortable. To say yes when your spirit is screaming no. To accept less than you deserve and call it patience, call it love, call it humility. But let me tell you something with all the strength in my soul. You were not created to live small, silent, or invisible. When you love yourself, truly love yourself, something shifts. Your walk changes. Your voice finds its power. Your presence enters the room before you do. You stop begging for seats at tables that were never meant for you, because you realize you are the table. Self-love is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is waking up and deciding, I matter. My time matters. My heart matters. And when you decide that, the world has no choice but to respond. Not everyone will like it. Not everyone will stay. But the right people, the right opportunities will rise to meet the standard you finally set. So today, choose yourself. Speak to yourself with kindness. Stand in your worth without apology, because the moment you love yourself out loud is the moment disrespect loses its power. Self-respect is the foundation of how the world treats you, because it quietly sets the rules long before anyone else shows up, long before people decide how far they can go with you, how they can speak to you, or what they can expect from you. There is an unspoken agreement you have already made with yourself. The world reads that agreement in your posture, your silence, your choices, and your tolerance. You may never announce your worth out loud, but it is always being communicated. When you respect yourself, you no longer negotiate your dignity. You stop explaining why your feelings matter or why your boundaries exist. You don't need to raise your voice or demand attention, because self-respect has a presence that speaks without words. It shows up when you walk away from what diminishes you, when you say no without guilt, and when you refuse to accept behavior that costs you your peace. People notice that. They feel it. And whether they admit it or not, they respond to it. On the other hand, when self-respect is missing, people sense the gaps. They sense hesitation. They sense self-doubt dressed up as kindness. They sense the fear of being abandoned, replaced, or misunderstood. And some people, not all but enough to matter, will test those gaps. They will push a little further, take a little more, speak a little harsher, simply because nothing stopped them. This is not because you deserve disrespect, but because the standard was never clearly set. Self-respect teaches others how to treat you by teaching you how to treat yourself first. If you constantly dismiss your own needs, others learn to dismiss them too. If you tolerate emotional neglect, broken promises, or lack of appreciation, it sends a message that this is acceptable currency in your life. Not because you said it, but because you lived it. Respect does not begin with confrontation. It begins with internal clarity. There is a powerful shift that happens when you decide that your time, your energy, and your heart are valuable. You stop chasing validation and start standing in truth. You no longer bend yourself into shapes that make others comfortable at your expense. You understand that being respected is not about being liked, applauded, or approved of, but about being aligned with who you are and what you will no longer tolerate. Self-respect is also deeply connected to courage. It takes courage to disappoint people who benefited from your silence. It takes courage to change patterns that once kept you safe. It takes courage to choose yourself when you were taught to put everyone else first. But that courage becomes the groundwork for healthier relationships, clearer communication, and a life where respect is not begged for, but naturally given. When you respect yourself, you stop performing for acceptance and start living from truth. And that truth reshapes every interaction, every relationship, every room you enter, because the world adjusts itself to the standard you quietly but firmly uphold within yourself. Loving yourself is a daily decision, because self-love is not something you arrive at once and keep forever without effort. It is not a finish line, a reward, or a title you earn after everything in your life becomes perfect. It is a choice you make again and again, especially on the days when you feel tired, unseen, or unsure of yourself. Some mornings you wake up confident and strong, and some mornings you wake up questioning your worth, your direction, and your value. And self-love is the decision you make in both moments. There will be days when loving yourself feels easy, when your accomplishments remind you of your strength and your reflection feels familiar and kind. But there will also be days when self-love feels like work, when your mistakes feel louder than your growth and your fears feel heavier than your faith. On those days, loving yourself may look like giving yourself grace instead of punishment, rest instead of criticism, and patience instead of pressure. It may look like speaking gently to yourself when the world has already been harsh. Because self-love is a daily decision. It means you do not wait for permission to treat yourself well. You do not wait until you are healed, successful, or fully confident to believe you are worthy of care. You choose yourself in the middle of becoming. You choose to nourish your mind, protect your energy, and honor your boundaries even when no one else notices. That choice, repeated over time, builds a deep and steady relationship with yourself. Loving yourself daily also means recognizing when you are abandoning yourself to keep the peace. It means noticing when you silence your truth to avoid conflict, or when you accept less because you are afraid of being alone. Each day gives you another opportunity to either betray yourself or stand by yourself. And while standing by yourself can feel uncomfortable at first, it slowly becomes the safest place you know. This daily choice teaches you consistency, not perfection. You will still have moments of doubt. You will still fall back into old patterns. But loving yourself means you do not stay there. You forgive yourself and begin again. You remind yourself that growth is not a straight line and that worth is not erased by setbacks. Every time you choose compassion over cruelty toward yourself, you strengthen your inner foundation. Over time, these small, daily acts of self-love change the way you live, and the way you relate to others. You stop seeking validation from places that cannot give it. You stop measuring your value by external approval. You become more honest about what you need and more selective about what you allow. Loving yourself daily reshapes your confidence, not into something loud or performative, but into something rooted and calm. It becomes clear that self-love is not a destination you reach and rest in, but a practice you return to, a promise you keep, and a relationship you nurture every single day, regardless of your mood, your past, or your progress. Disrespect from others often mirrors how we see ourselves, because people tend to respond to the energy, expectations, and standards we carry within. Long before someone speaks carelessly to you or dismisses your presence, there is often an internal story already playing about what you believe you deserve. That story shows up in subtle ways, in the way you tolerate interruptions, accept broken promises, or laugh off behavior that quietly hurts you. Others may not know your inner dialogue, but they feel its effects. When you doubt your worth, it becomes easier for others to doubt it too. Not because you are lacking value, but because uncertainty invites testing. People observe how much you question yourself, how quickly you apologize, how often you minimize your needs, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. Disrespect rarely begins as something loud or dramatic. It usually starts small, in moments that seem insignificant. But over time, those moments create patterns that shape how you are treated. There is a difference between kindness and self-erasure. Many people confuse being loving with being endlessly accommodating, believing that understanding others requires neglecting themselves. But when you consistently place your feelings at the bottom of the list, you teach people that your emotions are optional. They may not consciously intend to disrespect you, but they follow the unspoken rules you demonstrate. What you excuse becomes what continues. The way you speak about yourself also matters. When you constantly criticize yourself, doubt your abilities, or downplay your achievements, you are rehearsing a narrative that others may pick up on. Even in silence, self-perception is communicated. Confidence does not mean never feeling insecure. It means not allowing insecurity to define your boundaries. When you begin to see yourself as deserving of care, honesty, and respect, your reactions change, and those changes are noticed. Disrespect is not always a reflection of who others are. Sometimes it is a reflection of what you have learned to tolerate. This realization can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it asks you to take responsibility for patterns you did not consciously create. But within that discomfort is power. If disrespect is connected to tolerance, then respect is connected to self-awareness and choice. You have the ability to interrupt the pattern by changing how you respond, what you allow, and what you accept as normal. When you begin to see yourself clearly, you no longer over-explain your boundaries or justify your feelings. You stop waiting for others to recognize your worth and start acting in alignment with it. That shift does not require confrontation in every situation. Sometimes it simply requires distance, silence, or a firm no. The mirror begins to change when the reflection changes. As your self-perception strengthens, the dynamics around you start to shift. Some people rise to meet your new standard and others fall away. That loss can feel unsettling, but it also creates space for relationships built on mutual respect rather than tolerance. Disrespect loses its grip when you no longer internalize it or allow it to define you. The moment you begin treating yourself with dignity, speaking to yourself with honesty, and honoring your own needs, the mirror adjusts and the world responds differently because you are no longer asking to be respected, you are embodying it. Boundaries are an act of self-love because they protect what matters most: your peace, your energy, and your sense of self. They are not walls built to keep people out. They are lines drawn to keep you whole. When you set boundaries, you are making a clear statement that your well-being is valuable and that your emotional, mental, and physical space deserves care. This choice requires honesty with yourself before it ever involves anyone else. Many people struggle with boundaries because they confuse them with rejection or selfishness. They fear that saying no will make them unlovable, difficult, or alone. So they overextend, overgive, and overexplain, slowly draining themselves in the name of being kind. But self-love asks a deeper question. At what cost are you being accommodating? When your generosity leaves you exhausted and resentful, it is no longer love, it is self-abandonment. Boundaries are how you teach others what is acceptable in your life. Without them, people may unintentionally cross lines because none were clearly defined. With them, you create clarity. You show where you end and where others begin. This clarity is not harsh, it is respectful. It allows relationships to exist without confusion, manipulation, or silent suffering. People who value you will appreciate knowing how to treat you in ways that do not harm you. Setting boundaries also requires you to release the need to manage other people's reactions. Not everyone will understand your choices. Some may resist because they benefited from your lack of limits. Others may accuse you of changing or becoming distant. But growth often looks like distance to those who were comfortable with the old version of you. Self-love means trusting that your needs are valid even when they are not applauded. There is a quiet strength that develops when you honor your boundaries. You stop explaining yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop negotiating your comfort to maintain access. You begin to recognize that your time and energy are finite, and not every situation deserves unlimited access to them. This awareness deepens your relationship with yourself and reinforces your sense of worth. Boundaries also help you stay connected to your truth. They remind you that you are allowed to change your mind, to rest, to say no without guilt, and to choose yourself without apology. They are not rigid rules, but living agreements that evolve as you grow. Each time you enforce a boundary, you affirm that your needs matter and that your well-being is not secondary. When you practice boundaries as self-love, you begin to experience relationships that feel safer and more balanced. You give from a place of fullness rather than obligation. You listen without losing yourself. You show up without resentment. And in honoring your limits, you create space for deeper respect, clearer communication, and a life that reflects care not only for others, but for yourself as well. Your value does not need permission or validation because it exists independently of applause, approval, or recognition. Long before anyone acknowledges your effort, your sacrifice, or your growth, your worth is already intact. Too often, people place their value in the hands of others, waiting to be chosen, praised, or affirmed before believing they matter. But when your sense of worth depends on external validation, it becomes fragile, constantly rising and falling with opinions that were never meant to define you. Seeking validation can quietly become a habit. You look for reassurance in compliments, in attention, in being needed, in being accepted. At first, it feels harmless, even motivating. But over time, it teaches you to question yourself whenever affirmation is absent. Silence begins to feel like rejection. Disagreement feels like disapproval. And slowly, you start shaping yourself to fit what you think will be approved rather than honoring who you truly are. The truth is, people's opinions are shaped by their own experiences, insecurities, and limitations. They may overlook your value not because it is absent, but because they are unable or unwilling to see it. If your worth depends on their recognition, you give them power they were never meant to have. You begin to perform instead of live, to please instead of align, to shrink or stretch yourself in ways that leave you disconnected from your own truth. When you understand that your value does not require permission, something liberating happens. You stop waiting for green lights from people who do not control your journey. You stop explaining why your dreams matter or why your feelings are valid. You begin to trust your inner knowing, the quiet voice that says, "This matters to me, and that is enough." This shift does not make you arrogant, it makes you grounded. Self-validation is not about ignoring feedback or refusing growth. It is about knowing the difference between constructive insight and unnecessary judgment. It is about receiving opinions without letting them rewrite your identity. When you validate yourself, you can listen without collapsing, learn without losing yourself, and grow without betraying who you are. Living without the need for constant validation also strengthens your resilience. You are no longer shaken by every critique or overlooked moment. You understand that not being acknowledged does not make you invisible, and not being celebrated does not make you insignificant. You continue showing up, doing the work, and honoring your values because your motivation comes from alignment, not applause. As you practice self-validation, your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. You move with intention instead of insecurity. You choose paths that feel true even when they are not popular. You no longer wait to be told you are enough, because you have already decided it for yourself. And that decision changes how you speak, how you choose, how you love, and how you stand in the world without asking anyone to confirm what you already know to be true. Healing begins when you choose yourself again and again, because transformation is not born from one powerful moment, but from repeated acts of self-loyalty. For many people, healing has been delayed not because they lacked strength, but because they were taught to abandon themselves in order to survive, belong, or be loved. Choosing yourself interrupts that pattern. It is the moment you stop asking, "What do they need from me?" and begin asking, "What do I need to be whole?" Choosing yourself does not always feel brave or empowering at first. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels selfish. Sometimes it feels like you are betraying expectations that were placed on you long before you learned how to speak your truth. But healing is rarely comfortable in the beginning because it requires you to unlearn what kept you safe, but also kept you stuck. Each time you choose yourself, you reclaim a small piece of your identity that may have been silenced, dismissed, or neglected. This choice shows up in quiet, ordinary moments. It appears when you rest without guilt, when you walk away from what drains you, when you stop explaining your pain to people who refuse to listen. It appears when you honor your feelings instead of minimizing them, when you allow yourself to feel anger, grief, or disappointment without rushing to suppress it. Healing is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about being honest with yourself about what is not. Choosing yourself again and again teaches consistency. You may not get it right every time. There will be days when you fall back into old habits, when you doubt your progress, when you question whether change is even possible. Healing does not require perfection. It requires return. Each time you return to yourself with compassion instead of criticism, you reinforce the belief that you are worth the effort. As you continue choosing yourself, your nervous system begins to relax. Your body learns that it is safe to say no. Your mind learns that it does not have to stay on high alert to earn love. You begin to trust yourself because you have proven through repeated action that you will not abandon yourself when things get hard. That trust becomes the soil in which healing grows. This ongoing choice also reshapes your relationships. You become more discerning about where you invest your energy. You stop forcing connections that require you to shrink or perform. You attract people and experiences that align with your authenticity rather than your wounds. Healing does not isolate you. It refines who has access to you. When you choose yourself again and again, healing stops being something you chase and becomes something you live, woven into your decisions, your boundaries, your self-talk, and your daily rhythms, until choosing yourself no longer feels like resistance, but like coming home to who you were always meant to be,